Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com.
Well, we have so many devices these days, Steve. They're just coming out from everywhere. We're in the fortunate position to have a few around, whether it's a phone, tablet, laptop, and we'll stick with the mobile devices for this particular topic.
Yes.
Obviously, that introduces an element of how do you you obviously have to charge your batteries, and I think everyone is aware of how to do that. It's not terribly difficult, but obviously there are methods and suggestions to how to do that to, maximize not only the battery life during the day, but also its lifespan to get it to last for as long as possible. And it's interesting that I guess an analogy would be like, like the internal combustion engine in a car. The technology hasn't really changed. It's been tweaked and improved by tech companies and battery manufacturers, etc. over the years. It's still operating on the same fundamental principles, which is effectively don't leave it plugged in, don't leave your laptop plugged in indefinitely, for instance. Don't drain it all the way to zero often, or don't do full 0 to 100% charges on it every single day. I found it interesting on some of these tips that we were looking at that it was like don't let it go. Ideally, you wouldn't let it go under 20%, and you wouldn't charge over 80%, and just keep the electrons flowing and stuff.
That's right.
It's fascinating that we've got to the point where this is working pretty well, but it is still kind of old tech, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, we've had lithium-ion batteries now for, I think, better part of 10 years. Longer now. Like, they started off, I think, in laptops, and when we were still using video cameras, I think we used nickel cadmium a lot, and that had its own memory system where you had to discharge and recharge fully, and lithium ion's a bit different. I think the most interesting thing is about the overcharging of lithium-ion batteries, and nowadays the software on the charging, most manufacturers are quite sophisticated, so they do minimize as you get to that 100% from overcharging the battery. But what used to happen, particularly in the old days, is if you've ever sat around a campfire and thrown a can of food, like maybe some baked beans into the fire, and then you watch that can just expand as if it's going to explode, that's effectively what happens when you charge a lithium-ion battery up to 100%. It expands. It's full of energy, and the heat it causes it to disfigure, and if you're unlucky enough, burst into flames. So,
well, I mean, not to give Samsung its old a bit of a slap, but that was the issue with the the Galaxy, whatever it was.
That's right. It's actually an issue with a number of modern cars, and I'm not going to name them, but you go through the recall notices, and there's a few car models out there right now that you don't park in a garage because they can spontaneously burst into flame and burn your house down. So it's exactly the same thing.
Which is somewhat disconcerting. And it'll be interesting to know these things, given, battery-powered cars are going to become more of a thing over time. But you would expect that the technology would have to improve for it to become more widely adopted. And I guess the main issue with a lot of this stuff is that although the innovations in how the batteries work, and also just the charging mechanisms, like you said. So, people would notice, why does my charging start to slow down after 80%? It's because the software is chucking it into a trickle charge. And even though it might say 100% while you're charged, while you've still got the plug-in, I should say, it's actually not necessarily always charging, because it's allowing for a little bit of drop and increase and stuff like that. But it's interesting that with all of that innovation and all of that, ultimately that they're really the only things you can do to really sort of extend things. And no matter what you do anyway, over a long enough period of time, the battery's still going to degrade and not be at 100% capacity anyway over X amount of years anyway.
Well, that's right. I mean, it doesn't matter how good a care you take of your battery, you will overcharge it, you will undercharge it from time to time, and those things slowly wear it down. But if you keep it in good shape, then it will last for much, much longer. And good quality batteries by good manufacturers, as we all know, last a lot longer than sometimes the cheap, no-brand lithium replacements you can get. Although having said that, these days you don't get a choice. So in the old days of cameras, you could go and buy some no-name batteries, and in the early days of laptops, even you could go and buy, and phones, you could buy a second no-name battery to pop into your phone or keep spare. But these days you get what the manufacturer gives you, and that's also a good reason to get a good manufacturer who provides a good battery and a good charging system.
Absolutely. The other thing that struck me about this was it's that sort of more global, I guess, bigger story around what's the next advance in battery technology, because, back in the, we've had that laugh before about the dumb phones back in the, late 90s and 2000s that would, last a week on their battery, but that's because the phones...
Happy days.
But that's because they weren't particularly demanding on the resources. So I guess the next step that would be truly impressive is if you get your smartphone that, is in all intents and purposes a computer that does so many things, and they're powerful. They've got powerful chips in them. We demand so much from them in terms of capability and tasks, etc. The next step would be that a battery that could power, say, a smartphone like that, but would last a week without a charge. That would be the next step. That would be really impressive.
Well, it is really interesting, and you wonder how they might do these things. There are watches now. I think Garmin's got one out that's a solar watch that goes from, I think, 24 days roughly between charges to 56 or something like that if you get it out and use it in the sun. I don't know why people haven't added that to phones yet, because we had the old solar calculators back in the day, and I know that the drain on phones is a lot greater, but phones are mostly out of a lot of people's pockets anyway. So you'd think a few solar panels on there, maybe you get a little bit of trickle charge, and or at least let the phone work at neutral power.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that someone's working on that right now.
I hope so.
They just build it into the glass panel on the front somehow, or whatever it is they need to do.
Wouldn't that be more useful than a folding phone, for instance?
Exactly.
The other thing is you won't be able to tell, but I've been looking at watches recently. There is one watch that works on solar power and the heat generated from your body. So considering that phones are normally in pockets or out, if you put in solar glass and some sort of heat charging capacity from being stuck in your pants all day, maybe we'd never need to charge again.
That's very appealing if they can figure that one out. The one other thing I wanted to touch on before we move on was just wireless charging, and just like some comments I had on that, which was it's nice that it's there, but I've never really found a practical use for it, and I think largely it's because you can't use the phone while it's sitting on a pad. I know Apple came up with that magnetic charger thing for the iPhone 12, so you could pick it up, but that's really a variation on it being plugged in anyway. And it's just, it's like one of those things, like it sounds like cool tech, and I guess it is cool tech because, you just chuck it on the table and, it can charge, but it seems to have not quite the practical use that I would have expected from it. Well,
and we know that because if they were any good, everyone would have one.
Exactly. All right, well, we'll change tack now just to go on something different here. And I was reading this article about sensational content online, etc., and whether or not YouTube has become a breeding ground for such content. Now, obviously, we're picking on YouTube here, but social media in general could probably be, broadly put into all of this. maybe you could probably bring in news channels and just about everything else that's consumable media into it. But what I find interesting is that, I was thinking about us, for instance, doing this podcast. We started podcasting in general in a very different era. And we could just, talk about our topics. And, we're very moderate, I guess, in our discussions and topics. There's nothing really sensational that we're putting out there. But it's I don't know whether I found it depressing or not. I guess, I don't know. It just seems like you have to kind of, in having a look at a lot of what YouTube content creators are having to put out there, I've seen videos where they aren't necessarily any more sensational than, say, the style of what we're doing, but they'll usually put some sort of clickbait title that is sensationalist on it to get the clicks and the eyeballs, and there's almost no way to argue against that because the proof's in the pudding with the views that they get. And the best one that I just saw recently, just the other day, was something along the lines of how Apple destroyed the new M1 iPad Pro, with the inference being that no one would buy it after they, with the recent announcements with iPadOS 15 not really taking advantage of the M1 chip and all of that. But then when you actually watch the video, it's a lot softer than that. It's more just, if they had done this, if they'd done that, it might have been more interesting, but it's really just more of the same. And it was a much more moderate take on it, but the title gets you in. And I don't know what you think about any of that, but it just kind of makes me wonder what, is going on with all of that stuff. And if you've got any hope of producing anything that is just a normal conversation.
Well, look, I think one thing people often forget, and I even forget today, YouTube is a social channel, and it always has been. Why YouTube now is really coming to the fore is everybody's got a phone that can watch video, and everybody has got, unlimited data on their phone, so you just watch video all days. If we go back 5, 6, 7 years, Facebook was the dominant medium because then it was a post, it was an image, not so much video, and that was how you connected. And YouTube was just too data heavy. If you didn't have a browser, you just couldn't really interact with it. Now YouTube is the premier social, probably not fully realised yet, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the same sensational clickbait titles that we saw on Facebook 5 or 6 years ago and probably still see today. So I think, YouTube is now the new battleground for social supremacy. And the thing is that it's not regulated in the same way that Facebook is, or even Twitter for that matter. And so there's a lot of opportunities to grow on YouTube, and the way to do it is through clickbait.
And that kind of leads me to the next point, which is what does that sort of do to you as a content creator, so to speak? Because if you're just wanting to produce what you want to produce and just get it out there, it would seem to me that you'd have to, it's almost like putting a marketing spin on your material. And the problem is that if you're trying to do something that's a bit more moderate, but you have to put something sensational as the title to get people in, that could potentially, I don't know, harm the message in a way, or harm your potentially your credibility if you're doing it that way.
Yeah, look, I think so. But I think just like on your other socials like Facebook, which is the best example here, some people will start making content just to get views and make money, and the essence of the content just becomes secondary. They just scan whatever's trending on Google and just make a piece on it, and that's a content model that probably a lot of people who are genuine in producing content or feel that their craft is the production of content for entertainment or engagement, I'm afraid you can't compete. You have to do what you were talking about before, which is, you have a very well-balanced piece of content, but you have to still line it with a bit of clickbait.
So in which case, to round it out then, is the actual platform itself encouraging this behavior through the algorithms and whatnot? Because
no, I think it's people.
But I mean, I know we've got the whole negativity bias thing going on. So if you get something that's like got a negative spin in the title, you're probably going to get someone clicking on it. But at the same time, if you've got an algorithm on a platform that sees you click on 2 of these, and then it says, "Oh, here's another 10 that you might like," and then you end up watching all of those as well, and then you're down the rabbit hole. I don't know how you can really fight against that.
I don't either, but I do think that the algorithm is dumb. People are smart and people use the algorithm. So no one, and this has been a big bugbear as far as I'm concerned on Facebook with their impressions and all this sort of stuff. There's no way of measuring the value of the engagement in social. Like, likes, whatever, maybe, who knows. I've never seen any evidence that shows that anyone gets anything valuable from engaging with content on social media. That doesn't mean that people don't. It just means I've never seen any evidence that can show me what the value of that engagement was, the genuine value of that engagement. And so while you can make money by someone just watching 6 seconds, then it's a race to the bottom. You only need people to watch 6 seconds. Makes me, whatever happened to Vine?
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting in talking about this. Just like to sort of slowly wrap it up. Is that I think the shift in what you would produce and how you would stand out has shifted with this as well. So obviously there's that sense of you have to produce really well, and you almost seeing like the sort of extremes of this with YouTube content creators using $10,000 cameras to record in raw video, only to see it compressed down to 4K, whatever the some codec that YouTube is using that doesn't even take advantage of all that whiz bang material, and that the instead of just having good content that would make you stand out, it's much more than that now, and you have to sort of engage in a game with this clickbait stuff to kind of make it work. And whether or not there's a good balance between those things in terms of being successful at it. You can be financially successful and get the views, but is it for the reasons that you want them to be?
And that's the age-old battle, of art versus commercial success.
And we always know what wins in the end.
Well, we always know what wins, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. I guess I'll have to just go charge some batteries and create some content now and just feel good about it.
Have a pleasant afternoon doing that.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.